Okay, I'm doing something completely new to me here. As you know, I always like to squeeze Second Life into everything I do, and some would argue it's because I don't have a first life, but I hope you enjoy this virtual presentation anyway. This is Helen Frack. She's my alter ego in Second Life, and this is being recorded live from the University of Queensland Studies in Religion Island in Second Life. I'm using a program called Fraps to record this. It's used mostly for taking movies of video games. So this is the third piece of assessment for ACES863 Theory of Learning Design. So hi to Philip and James and Rosa and Alex and Heather and anyone else I might have forgotten. So let me start by telling you what I'm going to cover. I'm going to have a quick look at what learning design is. I'm going to talk to you about how I hope to use learning design, the learning context that I'm going to use it in. I'm going to talk to you about the learning design that I'm going to use. I'm going to explain what we mean by the term patterns, and I'm going to explain IMS learning design before reflecting on reuse and adaptation of learning designs. So first of all, what is learning design? Learning design provides a vocabulary for describing teaching and learning processes, and it is itself pedagogically neutral. The design becomes explicit and can be reflected upon by the designers themselves or by others who may further refine the design and share it within a community. Learning design allows us to talk about what we're doing in a standardized way so that once we're familiar with the vocabulary, we all know what we mean when we describe a learning design. So let's look at the learning context. I'm going to talk about a learning design for potential use in an advanced level university course that I teach, RELN 2300 Hinduism, Spiritual Traditions of India. The course is delivered flexibly with no face-to-face component. I would like to use an adaptive web-based educational system, especially to accommodate various learning styles. So there will be a variety of instructional choices so that students can choose which suits their learning styles best, and a variety of assessment choices for the same reason. The choices made will determine the subsequent instruction. Instructional choices might include vodcasts and/or podcasts, presentations with images or diagrams, text-based instruction or virtual field trips to Second Life, of course, to be delivered via a learning management system, and in this case Blackboard. This variety will accommodate all VARC learning styles, and according to this model, visual learners prefer diagrams, flowcharts and graphics. Auditory learners prefer hearing information via lectures or similar contexts. Those learners who prefer reading and writing benefit most from written explanations. Finally, tactile or kinesthetic learners learn best by connecting to reality through hands-on examples, role plays, debates, practice exercises and simulations. Similarly, there will be considerable variety in assessment as well. Students could choose whichever assessment piece suited their learning style, and they would include machinima, which is video of virtual field trips or role plays, etc., or the ever unpopular essay, a presentation, or they could craft a Wikipedia entry and subsequent revisions for immediate peer review, or collaborate via SBLI, which is Scenario-Based Learning Interactive, which is a piece of software developed at UQ. I've just put up an example of a piece of assessment using SBLI, which I actually did set for this semester. So how can I describe this learning design? To use the concept of patterns might be appropriate. Design patterns originate in the work of the architect Christopher Alexander in the late 1970s. In his 3 books, The Timeless Way of Building a Pattern Language and The Oregon Experiment, Alexander set out to reconceptualize approaches to architecture and urban design. According to Alexander, a pattern describes a problem which occurs over and over again in our environment, and then describes the core of the solution to the problem in such a way that you can use this solution 1,000,000 times over without ever doing it the same way twice. The idea has been appropriated by the educational community, and within this context, an educational pattern has the following structure: a picture showing an archetypal example of the pattern, an introductory paragraph setting the context for the pattern, explaining how it helps to complete some larger patterns, problem headline, to give the essence of the problem in 1 or 2 sentences, the body of the problem, its empirical background, evidence for its validity, examples of different ways the pattern can be manifested, the solution, stated as an instruction so that you know what to do to build the pattern, a diagrammatic representation of the solution, and a paragraph linking the pattern to the smaller patterns which are needed to complete and embellish it. So it's much broader and requires a creative leap. I have to decide what to do following the guidelines provided. Now I've included on this page a learning pattern that can be used in my learning design. It describes a solution for accommodating different learning styles in an adaptive web-based educational system. I'll put a complete copy of this on the discussion board so that you can take a closer look at it. It adheres to the structure that I just described. You'll notice it's not prescriptive. It doesn't say take 4.2 students and arrange them into 3 groups with a bunch of twigs, a cigarette lighter and a can of fuel. It suggests some approaches that I might try. So let's now turn our attention to Instructional Management System Learning Design, which I'll refer to as IMS-LD. This has emerged as the standard in the expression of formal learning design. It allows the expression of lesson plans as formally expressed units of learning. Learning designs with this specification are expressed in extensible markup language or XML, making them machine readable. And that is, learning designs can be run using IMS Learning Design compatible software, rendering the delivery management of courses more economical. Learning designs are represented diagrammatically using Unified Modeling Language or UML. IMS Learning Design is based on Educational Modeling Language or EML. It's defined as a semantic information model and binding, describing the content and process within a unit of learning, from a pedagogical perspective in order to support reuse and interoperability. Building on this language, IMS Learning Design was designed to provide a containment framework of elements that describe any design of a teaching learning process in a formal way, and apparently it does this quite well. Now, if you remember, the learning pattern structure was straightforward, and in contrast, the IMS Learning Design structure can be quite complicated. To build one, you have to go through this process, which I'm not going to describe, but you can see it's really anything but straightforward. Here is a diagrammatic representation of a learning design using UML. Please note that this is not for my learning design. This is just an example of what UML looks like. Don't look at it for too long or you'll lose consciousness, or at least you'll lose the will to live. And here is an example of something expressed in XML. Again, the same warnings apply. This is not to be undertaken by the faint-hearted and requires a high level of technical proficiency in the area. So I've already admitted to you that these figures don't represent the learning design I'm interested in today. But do you know something? My learning design couldn't be expressed in IMS Learning Design because it has some deficiencies. For example, it can't be adapted on the fly, and that's the very essence of my learning design. A student makes changes and this will becomes available later on. Also, the potential for collaboration exists, and even though IMS Learning Design can express much about collaboration, in contrast to earlier standards such as SCORM, it can't express timing accurately. For example, after this happens, then this should happen. There are other timing issues too. There has been the suggestion that a new IMS Learning Design specification called Group Service be created, and that this might alleviate some of the issues, but not all of them. Also, the IMS Learning Design can't interact with and be modified by, for example, the results of a quiz, or a choice of assessment or instruction, or anything that happens on a virtual field trip. Again, there is a possible solution, but it remains theoretical. So the idea of IMS Learning Design is fantastic. to take a unit of learning, export it, modify it, and run it again. And that's right, there is not a really successful way to run them yet either, though both Moodle and Blackboard claim at least some IMS learning design compliance. That's an issue for another day. So even representing my learning design hasn't been a straightforward process. What about reusing it and readapting it? Why would I even be thinking about that? Well, that's where we pick up again in the next part.